Okay, let's put the structure of the nephron and the renal circulation together. Now, there are two main places where the nephron interacts or intersects with the circulation. We need one place for substances to come out of the plasma, and then we need another place for substances to move back into the plasma. And each one of those is a capillary bed. So rather than looking at this where it's anatomically correct and the vessels are going between the lobes and over the arcs and all of that, let's take the circulation and let's stretch it out so that it's a straight line. So we have the renal artery, and it's not labeled here, but that branches into the segmental arteries, the interlobar arteries, the arcuate arteries, the interlobular arteries, and then it finally reaches this structure which we talked about called the afferent arteriole. The afferent arteriole carries the blood to the glomerulus, which is a very extra leaky capillary bed. And then anything that stays within the blood vessel moves into the efferent arteriole and is carried to the next capillary bed, known as the peritubular capillaries. We will talk about the vasorecta later. The peritubular capillaries carry the blood into the interlobular vein, the arcuate vein, the interlobar vein, the segmental vein, and then the renal vein, and then back out of the kidney. So we've just made this one straight line. Now I've drawn the nephron, not as a straight line, but so that the parts of the nephron that interact with the circulation are lined up. So here we see the glomerular capsule, the peritubular capillaries. No, the proximal convoluted tubule, the nephron loop, the distal convoluted tubule, and the collecting duct. Now here's roughly what happens. Everything that is in the blood that is carried into the kidneys reaches the glomerulus. But what happens here depends on a number of things. If it is large, like a blood cell or a protein like albumin, then it's too big to leak out of the glomerulus. So it stays inside the vessel, goes into the efferent arteriole, the peritubular capillaries, and leaves the kidney as it is carried through. Everything else comes out of the glomerulus. It's like spring cleaning your closet. You don't just open the closet and take out a few things to get rid of. You empty the closet and then you put the things back in that you want to keep, and everything else gets tossed or recycled. So if it's small enough to come out of the glomerulus, it does. So that means we have water, different kinds of ions, and glucose and amino acids and wastes. All of that leaks out of the glomerulus and is collected by the glomerular capsule. As it passes through the proximal convoluted tubule, the cells of the proximal convoluted tubule use transporters, membrane transporters, to move those substances into the interstitial fluid where they will be picked up by the peritubular capillaries and returned to the blood. If it's a waste substance, then the transporters don't put it back into the blood. It remains inside the tubule and then leaves the body. This is a somewhat simplified version of how it works. So if you're reading the textbook or you're looking up other things on Google, you will see that it is slightly more complex, but this is good enough to understand how it works. So let's take, for example, what happens with a molecule of glucose. Glucose would reach the glomerulus and would be filtered out and collected by the glomerular capsule. As it passes through the proximal convoluted tubule, the transporters in these cells would take the glucose and move it out of the tubular fluid into the interstitial space, where it would then be absorbed by the peritubular capillaries, and glucose would therefore remain in the bloodstream. If we look at a molecule of nitrogenous waste, it too would be filtered out at the glomerulus, caught by the glomerular capsule, pass into the proximal convoluted tubule, and the proximal convoluted tubule would say, we don't really want that in the body. So it would leave it inside the tubule, where it would pass into the nephron loop, the distal convoluted tubule, and then into the collecting duct and out of the body. So this is where the sorting takes place. We have an exit point for almost everything, unless it's too big to get out of the glomerulus. And then we have a re-entry or reabsorption point at the peritubular capillaries, where we bring useful substances back into the blood so that we don't lose them in the body.